Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Quantum Break hard difficulty video walkthrough. You just witnessed me go into the options, I increased the sensitivity, and I changed the wine axis. And now we're into the game, which is Act 1, Part 1, the Riverport University Experiment. And this is it, guys, this is Quantum Break, the next game by Remedy. A lot of people are calling it a Xbox One exclusive, which is not technically true because it is coming to PC. So anyone who's going to be picking it up on PC has, you know, the better version of the game to look forward to. And at the beginning, we're going to be meeting the main antagonist of the game, a guy by the name of Paul Serene, sorry. I nearly called him Paul Shine then, I don't know why. And what's going to happen here is, just like every other Remedy game you can play, you're going to be entering into encounters where you can interact and listen to radios and talk to people and collect things and really immerse yourself in the universe. And there's a lot to read, there's a lot to take in, there are a lot of little touches that you're not going to pick up on until later on in the game. And on your second playthrough, you're going to see so much more than you saw the first time, because this is of course a game about time travel, and whenever time travel is involved, it's often convoluted, and it's often much better to see the things that you just didn't think were significant the first time, and then the second time around it makes way more sense. But this is a walkthrough, ladies and gentlemen, and if you're new to my channel, I make walkthroughs that are as efficient and as straight to the point as I can make them. So you're not going to be seeing cutscenes in this, you're not going to be seeing any unnecessary moments in it. I'm going to be trimming it down and removing a lot of the fluff. One thing that is going to be apparent when I break these videos up into the act parts that the game designates them as, is that this is a pretty short game, with quite a lot of narrative emphasis, and those moments where the narrative is happening, when you remove them, doesn't really leave you with a lot there. So the parts where you're actually, you know, doing demanding gameplay and not just kind of being a walking head for exposition, are kind of fleeting and few between. It's a very interesting lean on a pacing structure that Remedy has done before, but in this game it seems to be even stretched further. So you're going to see 7-minute long videos, you're going to see these junction levels, which were a fantastic opportunity to do some different gameplay to the rest of the game, which instead are used primarily to tell story and to give you an other side of the story perspective, which I think is a great tool. I just don't think they used it as well as they could have, which I'm going to talk about later on. But short videos, guys, and it's interesting because the stuff that you do while you're playing it does feel quite long. If you're curious of the length of the game, it feels really long. But the thing is, you have to bear in mind how it's structured. There are 5 acts that comprise of generally about 3 parts each. They vary in size, but at the end of each act, there's a 20 to 25 minute television episode filling in bits of the story and continuing on as a different cast of the characters. They're all focused around this central plot thread. So you're going to watch cutscenes in this game in engine, like right now where we're listening to Paul explain this machine to us while we're doing miscellaneous tasks. You're going to be doing a lot of reading because there's a ton of rich diaries and histories and all kind of logs, which are pretty long and pretty in-depth if you want to learn about all the minutiae of what's going on in the facilities and in the history of these characters. And then at the end, you see the human counterparts acting out other parts of the story to fill it in, and it all comes together in this really interesting and intricate pie of different ideas coming together. And as a first playthrough, I found a lot of moments to be really, really interesting and intriguing, and I've never really played anything like it at all, really. I think the idea is great, and I think Quantum Break as a whole is also really, really good, but the part where it's a game, I can't help but tell you that I'm disappointed, and I feel it very lacking. And this is an observation that I'm going to elucidate on as we go through these chapters together. When we've talked a little bit of strategy and what's expected of you, I'm going to be able to really go into that because I am a massive Remedy fan. And I don't say this to try and earn brownie points from you. It's just the truth, you know. Max Payne 1 was one of the most influential shooters I've played, and there's a whole host of influential shooters in my personal gaming history that have set milestones in my life, and they're very special to me. And I talk all the time about things like Resident Evil 4 and Gears of War 1, you know, and Max Payne was one of those. before those, for me, it was an introduction to PC gaming that I'd never really been a part of, and it was all through a buddy of mine from school who was interested in that stuff, and I played them at his house. But it fused everything I loved about John Woo movies into, you know, The Matrix. Did it come out before or after Max Payne? I forget, but I'd seen The Matrix. I loved The Matrix. It was the ability to play The Matrix, really, and to play those Hong Kong inspired shooting moments and make it feel good, because not only was it impressive to watch, but it felt great to play. And this is an extension of what they started with Max Payne, what they followed on with Alan Wake and that narrative experience, and it's the culmination of all these pieces coming together as we turn the keys here with Paul, and then time effectively breaks down, as Sam Lake kept mentioning on all those press releases that we saw building up to the game. But we're still assisting, and you'll notice there's a lot of dialogue in this game, because just like with Max Payne and just like with Alan Wake, your main character is going to be vocalizing almost everything. There is no sub-vocalization here. It is all out there in the ether for the player to hear, and it's a storytelling device to keep you in the moment and to give you information without it feeling like it's too forced, because it's one of those things where essentially it's in medias res, isn't it? Because it starts at the end and it goes back and all that kind of stuff. And what we're hearing is the interview between the main character and another character who's happening in an interrogation room. But at the time, it's kind of that monologue that the character is giving, and it feels like you are a part of his head and his perspective in that instant. And it's a storytelling device that I really enjoy as a player of games and as a writer. So I think it does a great job of constantly keeping you and making you feel like you're in the game. And just look at the visuals of this title too. There are moments where the textures have a really tough time loading in, and where stuff can look kind of blurry and kind of goofy, but this is probably one of the most beautiful games I've played on the Xbox One by far, because just the amount of effects and the amount of stylized violence and just deconstruction of reality that's going to be happening with these time powers is wonderful to watch. And the great news is, when it's all kicking off and you're using your time abilities and you're shooting stuff and people are shooting you and it's going nuts with particles, it never truly affects the frame rate. And should the frame rate be 60? It definitely should, and on PC there's a chance it probably is. But on console, it's a solid 30 for the most, and there are moments when it does fluctuate, but there were never a moment where I felt like it affected gameplay, or where I felt like it was the reason why I couldn't get something done. But that was the beginning of this game, guys. Welcome to the walkthrough, welcome to the channel if you're new, and as always, you take care now.